They were dealing with misery. They were dealing with extreme malnutrition and poverty. They were dealing with oppression. And the northern Italians, all right, had to explain this to the rest of the world. And what they had to explain was not only 6 million leaving for America, but almost 20 million people going for lands throughout the world. Whether those lands were Brazil, Argentina, Australia, Austria, France, and England. How could a government explain that so many people would leave their native land? And of course, there was an explanation. They were subhuman. They were criminal. They were incapable of being part of a great nation. And what this produces is this slur. The slur that originally comes from the very people who exploited them and the very, very people who denied them their basic entities. When they decide to come to North America, one of the great stories that hasn't been told in as much vigor and as much detail as is necessary. It usually costs about $35 to travel from Italy to New York. But most of these individuals did not have it. So they were promised free voyage to the United States, all right? But in return, they would engage in what we would call contract labor. So these individuals were pretty much a form of indentured servitude. In Italy, before they left, they were generally fleeced by the steamship companies. They had to buy different clothes, all right? They didn't want to look like a greenhorn, all right? So they were, in effect, all their money that they had was gone. When they arrived on these ships, they were in steerage. And steerage was a fascinating place. It's where the mechanism of the boat is to direct its places on the sea. The place was filled with fumes. It was filled with the smell of urine and feces. They were given virtually no food. The food they were given was a broth, all right, which was often filled with different kinds of insects, perhaps unintentionally. When they arrived in New York as the most important place of destination, many of them were sick. Many of them suffered diseases because for the first time in their life, they were put together with people from different regions of Italy and different regions of Europe. During that time period when people got sick, what happened was the disease spread like wildfire. From healthy individuals living in sunny Italy, they now come to North America sickly and depressed. When they arrive in Ellis Island, and let me just backtrack a little bit. During the voyage over, one of the things that happened very, very frequently was that many of the women were raped. And it was the feel that these women were totally available to the people who worked for the steamship companies. What was the result? Well, in some instances, there were some men there who would want to attack. They would want to get some form of retribution. And when they did this, they were, of course, labeled as animals and criminals. All right? It's very, very important to understand the Italian mindset. They lived in a world for 2,500 years where they were constantly oppressed. They lived in a world in which all of their oppressors took from them. They lived in a world where they were isolated from one another in language and geography. And then when they decide to come to North America, they are fleeced in places like Naples, in Genoa, and Hamburg. And when they come to North America on their voyage, many of them are treated as though they were animals.